Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Lieutenant Stephen Rogers here on the East Coast of the United States of America. I'm here tonight to share with you some of the analysis that we've done here with regard to the impact that the Canadian truckers have had on those around the world, and the fact that those truckers in Canada, the citizens of Canada, have done an exemplary job in getting their point across with working within the framework of the law and not causing any type of violence. And we'll get on that a little later. But folks, I've got a message that I want to first give to the French President Macron, as well as other leaders around the world who are, in my view, committing acts of violence against law-abiding citizens. Now, I've been a police officer for 38 years. I'm retired. I was working for U.S. military intelligence with the Navy. I'm retired, so I'm pretty well experienced on how you address crowds. But what you don't do, President Macron, what you don't do, those of you who are so-called leaders in France, you don't attack law-abiding citizens who are protesting to protect their freedom and their liberty. It was extremely disturbing to see that the government of France decided to have the police hurl tear gas at the Freedom Convoy individuals. We don't work that way in a democracy, folks. We don't work that way where people are free, where people are exercising their rights to free speech to protect their liberty. We embrace what they're doing as long as it's lawful. Now, I've got to tell you something. With regard to the Canadian truckers and the people and the protesters, one of the most peaceful demonstrations that I've seen in recent time. I mean, very, very peaceful, dignified, honorable. And the impact that had, folks, listen to this. The impact that had on leaders around the world was chilling, believe me, because what a lot of these leaders, if you want to call them leaders, expect is that violence would break out, and that as a result, it would give them an excuse to put the hammer down, if you will, and then to blame the protesters for any acts of violence. Now, of course, there are going to be troublemakers that will be coming into the peaceful protest, but the people of Canada ought to be commended for the way they handled those protests. Now, look, there were a few people, whether it be here in America, in Canada, or elsewhere, that'll certainly cause some sort of disturbance. There was no white supremacist movement in that Canadian protest. There were no violent acts committed by the truckers. My goodness. But you see, this is the default that these tyrants depend on in order to try to win favorable points, if you will, from the public. Now, let me just say one other thing with regard to the Canadian truckers. The business people in the area that the trucks were blocking, they were getting quite upset and agitated over the protest. But I want to share with some of you who are watching tonight, it was not the truckers that caused the harm that your business came to financially. It was your government leaders. Look, the root cause of a lot of these problems, and I've consistently said this about the problems that we're facing in America. The root causes is that our leaders, if you want to call them leaders, they're not listening. They're not listening to the people. They're not listening to those of us who love freedom and liberty. And so blame your leaders. Your businesses got hurt across the country in the United States. I live here. I have friends that lost their businesses forever. Guess who shut you down? Not the protesters, but the people that were going out and fighting against these tyrannical mandates. It was the leaders. As a matter of fact, in this country, the United States, I've said it over and over and over again. I stand amazed how the Democrats, socialists, communists in this country could continue to vote for the very people that are shutting their businesses down. And that'll lead me to another issue a little bit later as we move on. So getting to some certain points we need to understand. It is not the truckers. It is not the Canadian people. It is those who love freedom, who love liberty, that went out there and protested so that they could continue to exercise their freedom, their liberty, their rights to free speech. Blame where blame should be taken, and that is at the foot of your capital, where your governors are, your prime ministers are, and where, at least here in America, the president of the United States is. And one more thing, particularly pointed towards President Macron of France. And I'm picking on him because it was his army, if I may say, his police that looked like an army, that put tear gas into the eyes and the faces of mostly peaceful protesters. Know this: any government, ladies and gentlemen, any government that unleashes its military or police in a violent way on the citizens of their country who are lawfully protesting, who are working within the framework of the law, that government has become a terror to the people. That government has become a terror to freedom and liberty. It's not the truckers who are a terror. It's not the people who are the terror. It is the government leaders who have become the terror to the freedom-loving people of their country. And that wherein lies the problem we have in Canada, in America, and across the country. We need leaders, folks. Leaders who are going to stand up and tell it like it is, not owned by special interests, not owned by lobbyists, not looking to win the favor of those who have the millions of dollars who put them in office. They think we're blind. They think that we are not intellectual enough to figure out what's going on. I could tell you in America what's going on. They're beginning to say, well, we don't need the mask mandates anymore. We don't need vaccine mandates. You want to know why, folks? It is happening now. Is it a coincidence that we have congressional elections coming up in November and the Republicans across this country here in America are going to wipe the Democrats right out? They know what's coming. They want to ease the pain. They think we're stupid, but we are not. We are pretty smart. The Canadian people are smart. The French people are smart. The German people, Australian people, the British people, need I go on, the American people. We the people are smart. We the people are smart. And we have a tool that they despise, that they dislike. We have a tool, and we're using that tool right now. They all control to some degree, believe me, the media, whether it's through paid commercials, whether it's through their wheeling and dealing when they get in office. But we now have a medium, and that is the internet. And we'll hold on to this as long as we could. And if they end up shutting us down, we'll find another way. Because good people always win. Good people are always victorious. Believe me, we are. The greatest threat, and I've said this on national television, the greatest threat to the national security of any country where the people are free, to any country where the people can exercise their freedom and liberty, the greatest national security threat to that country is a government that doesn't support policies that strengthen the freedom and the liberty of the people. It's not international foes that's the greatest threat to America. It is not international foes that is the greatest threat to Canada or France or Germany, where freedom-loving people come together to do what? To lift themselves up, to work together to build a better future for their children and their grandchildren. It is the leaders in office who are the threat. Because they want to limit our freedom and our liberty. They want to expand government power. You know what that's called, folks? It's called socialism and communism. When those truckers in Canada and when truckers around the world were protesting, I tell you, the first thing I thought about was Tiananmen Square in Hong Kong back in 1989, on June 3rd and June 4th of 1989. There, you know, some of us who have been around a while, we saw those wonderful lovers of freedom and liberty in Hong Kong, and that one man stood in front of a tank when what happened? When the Chinese Communist Party did what? Unleashed its police and unleashed its military on the people. And unfortunately, many people got killed. That is what happens when a government unleashes its military and police on the people who are fighting for what? Their freedom and liberty. I remember, too, also a guy named Lech Walesa. I'm sure many of you who have been around for a while remember him. The Solidarity Movement, the shipyard workers, the iron workers, the union workers, they rose up and they fought the Soviet communists who had control of Poland at that time. And they took them out. They destroyed the Communist Party in their country. These aren't people who are looking to fight a fight where there's no end game here, just for the heck of a fight. They're not fighting for pay raises. They're not fighting for better conditions at work. They're fighting for freedom and liberty. And you want to know, those of you who have written me some letters supporting your governments, you want to know why these people are fighting for freedom and liberty? because the government leaders you support, you know, the ones that are establishing policies to hinder our ability to exercise our rights, those individuals actually believe that the government and those who are now in government are actually giving us freedom and liberty as a privilege. They really believe that freedom and liberty is a privilege. Well, I've got breaking news for them, folks. Freedom and liberty was never a privilege given to we the people by the government. Freedom and liberty is a gift from God Almighty to his creation, to his human race. It is a gift from God to every single person who walks the face of this earth. Freedom and liberty is not made of man. It is a gift from God. And that is something they will never be able to change. They will never be able to take our freedom and liberty from us. Yeah, they could send police and they could send military and they could try to fine people and they could threaten them and bully them. But I'll tell you something, folks. There's something I learned a long time ago when you talk to people who are free, not only here in America, but in Canada, in France, and in countries around the world. You want to know something about the people who are free and who are exercising their liberty? It is embedded in their hearts. It is burned in the heart, soul, and spirit of those of us who have fought for freedom in the wars, who have fought for freedom in our streets, who have helped build our countries into free societies so that our children and our grandchildren could walk the streets, could enter buildings with flags of each of our nations that represent freedom and liberty. I've told Americans all over this country that I don't want my children to live in a country where they're going to walk in a building and they're going to see a red flag with a hammer and sickle flying over it. I want them to see this symbol of freedom, this symbol of liberty. And all of you who live in Canada and France and Germany and Britain and wherever you live, you are living in a free country. You get your flag. You get your flag, which is a symbol of freedom, and you share with your children. Nobody's going to take that away. I'm concerned about what our children are thinking about when they see the government leaders who are supposed to be leading a free country are actually trying to take our freedom away. But folks, just remember this. Just remember this. And I've gotten so many emails from people who have shared with me that they are in fear. They're in fear that they're losing their countries, that they're losing their freedom, that they're losing their jobs and their houses and their businesses, and it's all adding up to one thing, the loss of our freedom and liberty in our countries. That is not going to happen. And I'll tell you what, folks, back during the Cold War, those of you who have lived during that time here in America, we had a Soviet communist influence in this country that was something that you wouldn't believe unless you actually lived during those times. But it was Ronald Reagan, folks. It was Ronald Reagan, and it was Margaret Thatcher of Britain, and it was the Pope in Italy, and it was people all around the world, whether it be from Canada, whether it be from countries that became free after World War II. There was a collective group of individuals, leaders like Reagan and Thatcher, leaders like the leaders that during that time, our wonderful great neighbor of Canada, leaders in Britain, leaders all over the free world that came together and worked hard to do what? To take down the Soviet Union. And it did happen. The Soviet Union Communist Party was sent into the ash bin of history with all of its leaders. That is the model we're going to use. That is the model we're going to use to conquer the tyrants, the bullies, the intimidators. They don't like the idea, believe me, that there is no violence. You know, they don't believe me. They use the fact that there's violence in a lot of these demonstrations to advance their cause. But you see, what the Canadian truckers proved, what the Canadian people proved, was that it works. Peace works. Being smart works. Protesting works. Work within the framework of the law, and it works. So now what I find out tonight, think about this. Now I shared with the opening, I'm going to give you an idea of the impact that the Canadian truckers and the Canadian protesters have had on the world. We're getting reports now here in America and in other places that all of a sudden The mandates are going to disappear in a week, in 2 weeks. All of a sudden, mandates on masks, mandates on vaccines, all of a sudden they're disappearing. How are the mandates disappearing, folks? Because it was never about public health. It was about going after our freedom, our individual liberty and freedom. They'll never admit it. Maybe they're blind to it, but that's what it was all about. The people will always win if we do things within the framework of the law, work within each of our constitutions. We win, they lose. So here's what I'm going to ask you to do, folks. As time goes on, I'm going to ask you to do two things. Get together with your neighbors. You know, Ronald Reagan years ago talked about the conversation begins. It begins in the dining room table or at the breakfast table. That's where the conversation begins. Talk to your friends, your neighbors, people in a workplace. Come together. Talk about world events. Talk about what's going on in your country, and then talk about how you could solve them. I've shared with people in America, run for the school board, get committees together, get involved with your local political organizations, become involved. If they don't want to listen, create your own. That scares the living daylights out of politicians. Those of you who know me know I was an elected official. I served 2 terms and I walked away. I believe in term limits. But we will never lose our power if we work together. And that's what's happening worldwide. Truckers and other people from different professions all over the world are working together to take down the tyrants. Not to take down the government. It's the people in the government that's the problem. But we have constitutions. We have laws that give us the tools we need to make significant changes. So from school board levels, I've shared with people in America, to the White House, and from your capital to your local school boards, folks, wherever you are, begin to make the change. Get involved. You'll find people of like mind. You'll be amazed who will come together to get involved. Now, there's a way you could get involved. Doing what you've done, 200,000 hits on our last broadcast, sharing information. I'll tell you, folks, I said last week, we have become the new 21st century Radio Free Europe. During World War II, there was something called Radio Free Europe, where we had to broadcast accurate information, broadcast encouraging words, and broadcast words of strength to people all over the world to let them know that Hitler and the Nazis and everybody else who was a tyrant on this earth wasn't going to destroy them, because we were working together to save the freedom and liberty of people all over the world. So you are doing something right now. Share this video, share accurate, credible information via the internet with your friends and neighbors, and then have those conversations. Now, here's the second thing. You know, I have a cup of coffee every morning about 5 o'clock. Yeah, I wake up that early. And I have a cup of coffee and I talk to God. I do. Now, look, I'm not a preacher. I've been involved in law enforcement, the military, and politics my whole life. But I know and I understand one thing, and I believe this because I've read the Bible from cover to cover. I believe in the power of prayer. I believe in communicating with God. I believe in saying, look, we need your help. We need your guidance. It is you who gave us the gift of freedom. It's your gift to us. So don't you think, oh, Lord, you want to protect that gift and you want to protect those freedoms? And the answer is always yes. So pray. There is power in prayer. Pray for your families, your nations, and for God to give you the guidance and the strength and the wisdom to get the job done. We will win. Freedom and liberty, remember, is not a privilege that the government gives us. It is a gift from God. So let's continue to pray and move forward and support those of us who are going out there and doing what we need to do to at least draw a lot of public attention to some of the problems that our countries are facing, and we win. Believe me. Stay involved. Don't be discouraged. There is a dawning of a new day, folks, for all of our countries. There is a sunrise for all of our countries. There is a morning in America. There is a morning in Canada. There is a morning in Britain. There is a morning in Australia. There is a morning in Italy and New Zealand, and on and on and on. There is a morning coming, a sunrise coming for every single freedom-loving country on this earth. All we've got to do is, what's it say in the 121st Psalm? I looked upon the hills whence my help came from. That's all we need to do. Now, let's get on to what's happening as we close down. In fact, it is 7:20. I've promised a 20-minute broadcast that topic was very, very important, and I'm glad I was able to share it with you. Real quick, Joe Biden's Vietnam, keep an eye on things. I understand tonight that the Russians are now moving some troops, possibly in attack positions. I'll get on that issue next Monday night at 7 o'clock. And also, many of you have heard around America and the world that the investigation regarding Hillary Clinton is now getting some traction. So you see, folks, all sorts of things are going on to inhibit our ability to be free and to exercise our liberties. But hey, listen, in the end, we win, they lose. That's a fact, folks. Soviet communism lost, Chinese Communist Party, they're going to lose. The tyrants are going to lose, and good, freedom-loving, God-fearing people are going to win. That's it, folks. So a couple of quick things. A lot of you want to know about me. Go to our website, campaign4america.com. It's on that blue band down there. Just go there. You can read about who I am, what I am. And folks, I'll tell you something. You're never going to get a request for a donation from us. There's so much of that going on. You pay for your taxes, your bills, feed your families. We pray to God. He'll take care of us in his way. I firmly believe that. So you go to campaign4america.com. You'll find out what we're all about. And you know what? We've expanded this to Campaign for America, Campaign for Canada, Campaign for all freedom-loving people, because we need to stand with each other against something that unlike anything we've ever seen before on this planet with regard to political leadership. So that's it, folks. And look for leaders. You all got leaders somewhere in your towns, in your countries. Look out for them, folks. And you know what? You're going to find that out of all of this, out of all of what's going on, the good Lord will anoint a leader. A leader will rise up, stand strong, and represent the best interest of the people. For governments should fear the people, not the other way around. That's it, folks. 20 minutes. I promised. I got pretty close to it, right? 22 minutes. Well, God bless you all. I will pop in during the week. Please share these broadcasts. And look, next Monday night, 7 p.m., we'll come back. We'll give you updates, and we'll continue to do what we must do. Work with each other for the good of what? For the good of our children and our grandchildren. God bless you. God bless Canada. God bless America. And God bless all of the freedom-loving people throughout the world. Thank you. And don't forget to pray. Pray tonight. Pray when the sun comes up. Pray when the sun goes down. God bless you all. Until next time, I'm Lieutenant Stephen Rogers.